My name is Luke Turnbull, and this is my presentation on the film The Seventh Seal. Now, The Seventh Seal is a film that was written and directed by Ingmar Bergman and released in 1957. The film follows a disillusioned medieval knight named Antonius Block, who finds himself returned to his homeland that's now ravaged by the Black Plague. Antonius is confronted by death, in which they both initiate a chess match in order for Antonius to delay his inevitable fate long enough to find purpose and meaning within his life. Ultimately, the film explores humanity's search for faith and purpose in the face of inevitable mortality. Now, the film also explores numerous philosophical ideas, such as skepticism, faith versus reason, and this idea of rational doubt and the inevitability of immortality. Now, this film is very philosophically dense, so unfortunately I can't discuss every single philosophical viewpoint, but I will talk about the ones that I personally feel are the most prevalent. And arguably the most prevalent philosophical and thematic idea in this film is this idea of disillusionment in religion. Now, as stated before, Antonius is a knight who had just returned from the Crusades, and what he finds is that his home is ravaged by the Black Plague, by religious persecution, death, hatred. All of these factors playing in leads Antonius to feel very discontent with traditional religious ideas. He feels somewhat betrayed by God and by the church. So it triggers this kind of idea of extreme rational doubt, something that we would see out of, similarly to what we would see out of the philosopher René Descartes. Now, Antonius is even quoted as to say, "I want knowledge, not faith, not superstitions, but knowledge." This is representative of his overall idea of trying to find this objective truth about religion. He doesn't want traditional notions of faith, but he wants this objective truth that God exists. Now, author Hubert Dreyfuss, in his analysis of the film, points out that this search for this objective truth never really comes to fruition. He never really finds this objective truth about God, and it leads him to the state of theological aporia, not unlike what we would see out of a Platonic dialogue. Now, like a Platonic dialogue, Antonius does find a revelation, but it's not necessarily the one that he wanted. Now, likewise, Antonius is not the only character to have very strong religious views in the film. The film presents this idea of faith versus reason pretty prevalently with the main cast. We see this idea of skepticism from Antonius, obviously, but his squire, John, also is very representative of skepticism or pessimistic atheism as well. They kind of are more representative of rationality and reason. Now, there are two other characters in the film named Joff and Mia who are traveling performers, and they're kind of more representative of ideas of faith and joy. Matter of factly, in the very beginning of the film, Joff actually sees a vision of the Virgin Mary holding an infant Jesus, which is kind of placed into this idea that they're more representative of these ideas of faith and joy within life. Now, as stated before, the knights are kind of representative of skepticism, a type of skepticism we would see from a philosopher named René Descartes. Now, René Descartes is kind of like the father of skepticism. Descartes had a system where essentially he would doubt everything until he could find this objectivity. It was called this hyperbolic or extreme rational doubt. Now, the knights kind of have this, but it's more so towards religion instead of all things. And the film really leans heavy on this idea of faith and reason being separate, yet we can contrast this idea with a philosopher named St. Thomas Aquinas, who points out that reason in man is God's gift to him, but revelation is a higher gift, which is indicative of Aquinas' philosophy. Aquinas was very, very influenced by Aristotle and his ideas of reason. And Aquinas basically believed that reason and faith are not something that are separate but complementary, that could be married together. So there's this kind of this contrast that we see faith and reason being separate, yet they could also be potentially equal. And this is played into a little bit later near the end of the film. But before we can really talk about that, we need to look at the last philosophical point of the inevitability of death. Now, throughout the film, Bergman portrays death as inevitable, impartial, visiting everyone no matter what they do or who they are. As stated before, Antinius and Death are playing a chess match throughout most of the movie. Most of their interactions are presented through this chess match. Now, interestingly, ultimately, this chess match is not winnable for Antinius. No matter what, even from a strategic viewpoint, it's not possible for him to win, yet he chooses to play anyway, because he has this hope that he could just delay his inevitable fate just a little bit longer so he could find his objective truth. Inevitable is kind of the term that Bergman was trying to really hammer home, that death is the ultimate fate for all humanity, that no matter what, death is the inevitable. Now, philosophically, we can tie these ideas back to a philosopher named Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche was a German philosopher who lived in the late 19th century. He was very well known for his radical views on traditional religious beliefs and Western culture. Now, you could tie a lot of Nietzsche's ideas to this film, but the most relevant in terms of talking about death is this idea of embracing death. Now, Nietzsche's not saying that you should be happy about the fact that our time on earth is limited, but he's saying that you should be conscientious of it, because if we're conscious of it, then we should be conscious and accepting of the fact that our time on earth is limited. Because if we do that, paradoxically, we actually kind of live a happier life, because instead of living off of this looming threat or external threat of inevitable mortality, we're living based off of our own interests and beliefs, which almost kind of ties in perfectly near the end of the film. But to kind of understand this, we should probably look at an overall view of the philosophical connections within the film. Now, we talked about how the Knights embody this idea of rational doubt, that they systematically doubt everything based off of religion, like Descartes' view on hyperbolic doubt. And we've also seen that this idea of faith versus reason, faith being portrayed primarily by Joff and Mia, and it's this idea of it being separate from reason is contrasted by Aquinas' views. Now, we also see this idea of disillusionment in religion in Antinius, which is very similar to a lot of the works that Nietzsche would have said, a lot of his viewpoints. Now, when talking about death's inevitability and Nietzsche's idea of embracing death, we see this near the end of the film. Near the end of the film, Joff and Mia are separated from the rest of the group, and Antinius and his squire and the rest of the group, apart from Joff and Mia, go to this castle. And one of the key viewpoints throughout this film is that Antinius wants to see his wife again, and he gets to do that, but shortly after, he's confronted by death for a final time, and all of the characters, apart from Joff and Mia, are seen doing the dance of death as pictured right here. This is a representative of humanity's ultimate fate, that we are bound to the ultimate fate of meeting death. Though, since Joff and Mia is there, that's also representative of the fact that abstract ideas of love, of happiness, of creativity persist even past death, which is kind of what Nietzsche was trying to portray with his ideas of being conscious of our own mortality, that if we allow ourselves to be conscious of the fact that one day we're not going to be here anymore, that we live more complete and full lives, that we strive more to complete our own goals and aspirations and not be tied down by these external threats of death. Now, ultimately, the film does kind of portray a very bleak picture of humanity's futile attempts to avoid death, but it also paradoxically shows that, like, if you choose to be conscious and embrace the fact that our time on Earth is limited, you actually end up living a bit of a happier life as a result of that. The film also presents many different philosophical viewpoints, the ideas of faith and reason, such as that we see from Aquinas. We also see this idea of disillusionment in religion, that we could see from Nietzsche, and the skepticism that we see from Descartes. All this comes together to create a very compelling film about trying to navigate and trying to find objective truth in this world of uncertainties. Though, the one thing that Antinous does learn is certain, is that no matter what, death is inevitable. That is the ultimate end. Checkmate. Thank you so much.